What's up, everyone? What's up, everybody, and welcome back to the We Don't Know TV podcast. My name is Leaf. I am your host. This is a podcast where we watch the first episode of a show and then we talk about it. And today we are talking about Secret Level. So the premise on IMDb states original story set within worlds of iconic video games as featured in this animated anthology series. So that is pretty spot on. I got nothing else to really say about that. Unlike last week where that one was completely wrong. But yeah, so this is an anthology series all about video games. If you don't know what an anthology series is, basically each episode is its own individual story. So you don't need to watch anything before or after to really know what's going on. I guess the only thing would be like maybe the specific video game. But again, these are all supposed to be individual stories. So for the first episode, it is about Dungeons and Dragons for some reason, which doesn't really make sense to me because, you know, when you think D&D, you think of the actual like role-playing game of like sitting with your friends either in person or on, some sort of Zoom call and like doing a story as opposed to like a video game. I know if you're in the gaming space like me, Baldur's Gate 3, which is based on Dungeons and Dragons, huge game of the year last year, but I just thought it was a really weird choice for the first episode to be about Dungeons and Dragons. But if it's your first time here, I go through the plot beat by beat. That way you don't have to, and that way I don't forget anything. So if you see me look down, I'm looking at my notes. First episode is Dungeons and Dragons: The Queen's Cradle. We see some people overlooking a camp, and it seems like they're kind of like setting up for an ambush. We move to a kid in a cage. He has a bunch of like tattoos and kind of like scars on his face, and something's flashing. There's like voices in his head like talking to him, and he's like trying to shut it out. And the art style right off the bat is photorealistic. Like if you ever played a video game and you see the cutscene and you're like, why don't they just do like a movie like that? I mean, this is what basically this show is. So it looks awesome, and yeah, like I was saying, it just looks like, you know, if they took a cutscene from the beginning of the game and was just like, yeah, let's just do a show about that. Those people that were kind of like overlooking are now outside of his cage, and you can hear them talking, but you can't really see them. And they're like, oh, it's a human boy. He's either in trouble, or he's in the cage because he's either in trouble or is trouble, or the latter, you know? So someone's like, oh, this is now turned into a rescue mission. So they're here for some reason. And as this is happening, the inner voices are still talking to him. Sometimes it's in English, sometimes it's in this other language, but basically, you know, they're just, you know, telling him to do things. We hear the group outside talking, and someone says, these are hallowed grounds protected by the great Oriole, and a fight breaks out. Someone we kind of see through, because in the cage there's like a sheet over it, so there's a little hole, and you can see one of the characters transform into a giant boar, which is cool. And a voice says, it matters not, you are mine. And oh wait, okay, sorry. Let me backtrack. All right, someone transforms to a giant boar. The cage gets knocked over, or yes, and then the voice in the kid's head says, it doesn't matter. Like, these people are here. Basically, you're still mine, and he gets knocked out. All right, we wake up. He wakes up. He sees a varied group. You know, you got like a human, almost like an elf, a gnome. You got a dwarf. You got an orc. You know what I'm saying? Very varied. And you see some sort of, I thought it was a dragon, fly overhead, and we cut to some sort of lich type thing, like this like undead creature who's like using magic into a crystal ball, and it's like looking and being like, you know, I see where you are. So right off this point, right, we're probably like, because I gotta stop to take notes all the time, probably like 4 minutes into the episode, and this already feels like I'm like hopping into the middle of a movie. You know what I mean? Or like, you go to the movie theater, you went to the bathroom, you came back, and you're like, oh fuck, how did this start? This is how the episode starts though. So it's kind of cool that we're kind of dropped in, but there's not enough information to be like, all right, cool, I can just kind of, it is like, what's going on here? And the show like doesn't help at all. So it kind of like is, you know, for it and against it. But going back to the story, we meet Mora. It turns out that the kid was kidnapped, but they're kind of talking amongst each other, but not really talking to him too much. But it turns out that he must have been kidnapped by the cult of the dragon, and now they're going to take him to Oriole, Oriel's the toothpaste, right? Oriel to heal him. And it turns out that the gnome, Tally, she's not on board. And he's like, you're in terrible danger. Wait. Is that right? I didn't write these notes properly. Someone says you're in terrible danger. So one of the other characters is like, yo, chill out. He's not a danger. Like, the tattoos on his face are because he's marked for sacrifice. They're probably going to take him to this place called the Well of Dragons, and they're going to sacrifice him to Tiamat. Now, again, if you don't know Dungeons and Dragons, like I don't, there's just a lot of words and terms, and the show doesn't hold your hand or really explain anything. It just kind of goes. So, yeah, there's just a bunch of fantasy things thrown at you. And he is not about it. He's like, no, like, you guys got to stay away from me. She's coming, and we see a flash of like a dragon's eye. And for a split second, he gets like super speed, and he like takes Mora's knife and he stabs her with it. And even Tally's like, how the hell did he move that fast? And she's like, you're gonna burn, kid. And she conjures a fireball in her hand. She's about to throw it. Mora stops her. She heals her, takes out the knife, heals herself. She's like, let me take him for a walk. You know what I mean? Let me talk to him real quick. Everybody calm down, all right? So they kind of go outside. It seemed like they're around this campfire at first, but then it turns out that they're in this like magic shield bubble thing. So they walk outside into the night. The orc that transformed earlier is kind of on the ridge, kind of on lookout. And Mora walks the kid over, has a little chat with him. She's like, what's your name? He's like, I'm Sullen. She's like, I don't think you wanted to hurt me. I think you're actually way stronger than you know. And then the little voice in his head, it's like, no, lies. Like, don't believe her. And she puts her hand on his shoulder, and the voice is kind of like, calm down. He comes kind of like back to you. And he's like, you should leave me. It'd be so much easier. And she's like, well, just because it's easier doesn't mean it's right. And in this moment, we learn more about Mora. She says, I wasn't always a paladin of Torm. Again, just throwing terms out there, not really explaining anything. She's like, most of the scars you see on mainly her face, or she's like, are all from fights that I've started. But she's like, now I fight the person I used to be every day. And sometimes I lose, but, it's kind of the thing that like brings me on, is to be a better person. She kind of like points to her shield, and there's a symbol on it. And she's like, this is another thing that helps remind me of like, I'm not alone in my own individual fight in every single fight. She kind of, there's like a hand on the shield. That's a symbol. And she takes it and she gives it to him. And she's like, here, you hold on to this, maybe it'll kind of keep you comfort. And this is where the orc gives the whistle, and they're like, oh, like they found us, we gotta move. And you see, again, the thing I thought was a dragon, and a bunch of like some people riding on horses. They've been caught. So the team rides off, and you see this super cool statue of like a kneeling person holding a sword, but the sword is the bridge, and it's super sick. If you're watching YouTube, I'll put it on there. And so they get to this giant door that has a dragon on it, and I was like, wait a minute, we keep seeing a dragon eye. Is this going to be some sort of evil plot twist? I don't know, because again, I don't know too much about Dungeons and Dragons like that. But as they get to the door, Tally, the gnome, she's just doing magic. She's like opening the door. The bad guys kind of catch up to them. The orc, I don't know if they said her name, his name. I don't even know. It just, that character was just kind of there. But I'm just going to say the orc. So the orc does like some sort of magic, tries to block off the riders. But the lich is on top of a giant bat. I thought it was a dragon. Is on top of the dragon, rains down icicles. Tally is about to be hit, but Sullen the kid blocks her, takes a couple icicles to the back. She's like, oh no, this isn't good. We're here to save him. Mora, get him inside. It's not looking too good. So she starts to go inside, and everyone kind of like blocks the door. We go into the inside of this, I don't know, temple, I guess you would say. And Oriel is there. Turns out Oriel is a giant golden dragon. He's like, calm yourself, you're safe now. But the way that they animate it, he's like very much in the kid's face, and it looks scary. And I think it's done on purpose, just because, you're so used to dragons being this force that even if it is on your side, it's kind of like, whoa, like, man, chill out. The kid's like, oh, the thing inside me doesn't like you. And he's like, well, the wicked usually don't like me, so another day. You know what I mean? And he's like, listen, well, Solon is saying this to the dragon. He's like, listen, I don't want to hurt you. And he's like, your kindness is the exact thing that proves that this doesn't need to be inside you. So we cut back outside, and their group is fighting. And there's this funny part where Lunsum from earlier, the guy that was like, oh, they're probably going to take him to the Well of Dragons or whatever, is like, there's too many of them. We're being overwhelmed. But they're kicking ass, and I'll put it here, but like again, if you're on YouTube you'll see what I'm talking about, but they're like kicking ass and taking names. So I was like, y'all really doing fine, so I don't know why you're stressing, my guy. And the only person that's not doing well is Tally, the magician from earlier, because the Lich shows up and he's just like snuffing out her magic, and she looks like she's in trouble, but then suddenly the orc turns the Lich thing into a snail. And so I was like, okay, cool. So like the problem wasn't even the problem. So I was like, what are we stressing about? It doesn't make any sense whatsoever. So we go back inside. Well, actually, it was kind of cutting back and forth, but the way I'm saying it, we're going to go back inside. Oriel is sucking out the curse from Sullen. His eyes, like his pupils dilate really big. And, Sullen starts to float up, and all the curse or whatever is like pouring out of his eyes into Oriel's eyes, and he's absorbing it. All the markings fade off of Sullen's face, and he's, finally the voices are gone. He's happy, gives Mora a hug. Everyone comes in. Date looks like it is saved. Oriel's like, man, you used to deal with this all the time in your head. He's like, the voices are super loud. He's like, it's actually pretty impressive that you, and then he starts to spaz out. And he's like turning like gray almost, and he's like bashing around in this temple. He's knocking everything down. He's like, run, like get out of here. But they don't, and he turns gray. He kind of falls over, and then it seems like one dragon burst out, but then you see it has 5 heads, and then they're like, oh, it's Tiamat, so it is the dragon goddess herself. At least I think, based on the little I know, pops out, and all 5 heads point at the heroes, and they all shoot. It seems like each one has a different element, which is pretty cool. So it's like fire, ice, poison, like all at the same time. Sullen has now found his confidence. He puts up a magic barrier. He's like, listen, I've been dealing with her for years now. You guys get out of here. I'm gonna handle this. And they're like, nah, dude, like you're not alone anymore. Let's take this bitch down. So they all kind of line up, do the hero shot, and the dragon heads come in, and that's where the episode ends. So if it is your first time here, I have a 3-point rating scale. It is 1 and done. Give it a chance, and I'm in. For this one, I'm gonna give it an I'm in. I think this episode was pretty awesome. I think the photorealistic animation was sick, especially for Dungeons and Dragons, which I know it's fantastical, but it's kind of nice to see, like, oh, how could this look, almost as if we did it live action, but we have the freedom of animation to do like some crazier stuff instead. And I know some people are, especially like in the video game space, like, oh, photorealism, we're doing it like too much, and I get it, but because this is a show and not a video game, I can kind of give it a little bit of a pass. Again, I think the 2 things that would really pull away from this episode is because each one is based on one video game. You might be like, I don't want to watch this one because maybe I don't care for Dungeons and Dragons. And especially for this one, like I was saying in the beginning, I think Dungeons and Dragons is such a weird pull. I think it would have made way more sense to call this one like Baldur's Gate instead of Dungeons and Dragons, just because Baldur's Gate is actually a game where Dungeons and Dragons is more of a role playing, like live, thing that you play with your friends. So I think that was weird. And the other thing, like I was saying, is it just feels like you've been dropped in the middle of a movie and nothing is explained. They're saying gods and terms, and if you don't know anything about Dungeons and Dragons, you're like, I don't know what the fuck's going on. Like, everything looks cool, and like you're doing cool stuff, but like, what is this? You know what I mean? But I mean, all of that, if you can put all that aside, I think this was an awesome episode, and definitely something I'd be like, because they announced, as of me recording this, that they're going to make a season 2. So if they were to go back to something, I'd be like, yeah, let me get episode 2 of like what happened to them. You know what I mean? Like, did they all make it out? What happened to Tiamat? Because I mean, that's a god on Earth, so like, Did we have to banish her back? Stuff like that. I think is really cool. So yeah, it was just pretty awesome. And then again, the fact that each episode is about different video games. Like, oh, if there's one on there that I like, and it's like this, you know what I mean? Sign me up. So yeah, I would give this one an I'm in on my rating scale. Now for the season as a whole, no spoilers. But I did watch about half of the episode just because some of them I was just like, I don't really care for this video game, so I'm not gonna watch this episode even if it is cool. So again, kind of going to the general appeal of the show itself. But I watched the Sifu one, the Mega Man one, Warhammer 40K, and Concord, which is funny if you know that story. And I watched the last one, which is kind of like the PlayStation episode. And for the most part, those episodes were good. The PlayStation one was awful. It was just like everything you don't like about like Marvel writing of like, he's right behind me, isn't he? Type stuff. And it was just like, what is this episode really even about? And it just felt like the most like markety, like, it's just, I would skip this one if you're going to watch the season. Or just like watch the beginning so you can see what I'm talking about. But yeah, that one's not good. But the rest of them were either really good self-contained stories where it's like, oh cool, I can go for more of that, or more of that like, oh man, like I wish like the Mega Man one was like, man, I wish we'd have a show now, because it felt like you really led us onto like the beginning of an origin story and then you just cut it off. And then you get some other like the Pac-Man one is very like cerebral and like very different from what you would think of. What's a Pac-Man story? It's pretty crazy. I definitely recommend that one just to see like them pushing the medium of like, what can we really do with an IP so known in like a very different way. So yeah, I think a lot of the episodes are pretty sick, and they kind of want you leaving. They kind of have you leave you wanting more. I can talk. So yeah, I'd be excited for season 2. I just kind of hope that, I feel like a lot of the IP in this one, I feel like half the IP in this one is just kind of like, you chose this one, like why? You know what I mean? So I hope like in a season 2 we would get more well-known IP, and just like really, yeah, just really draw more people in and get more crazier stories. So yeah, I think I will leave this episode here. And yeah, I definitely looking forward to season 2 and hoping we get some cooler stories and some other IP up in here, and maybe some sequels to some of them. So yeah. All right, well, that is it for this episode. If you want to recommend another show, leave a comment down below. If you like this, give it a like. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I already said like. Why did I say it twice? And I will see y'all next time. Peace.